Hey everyone, this is Ms. Camp with AP World History Modern 7.2 Causes and Consequences of World War I. We're going to start off looking at the causes of World War I. Now my students who are watching, I want you to stop as soon as I finish talking here and write down both the learning objective and the historical developments that we're going to be looking at. I do expect you to be taking notes through this. You're at the end going to respond to the learning objective, and then you're going to take pictures of that and the notes, upload them to Google Classroom. So our learning objective, explain the causes and consequences of World War I. If anybody loses track of that, it will be at the bottom of the screen the entire video. And historical developments we're looking at, the causes of World War I included imperialist expansion and competition for resources. In addition, territorial and regional conflicts combined with a flawed alliance system and intense nationalism to escalate the tensions into global conflict. So just looking once real quick at the historical developments, you can see how this comes straight out of Unit 6, and what we've learned so far in 7.1 with the shifting power is coming all of this together to set us up for our First World War in the 20th century. Okay, so let's take a look at what is going on, a snapshot of the world in the earliest 20th century. 20th century being the 1900s. So by about 1900, Europeans and people with European ancestry, largely Americans, North Americans, control the whole world through empires, through spheres of influence, through various different types of economic imperialism. This control over the world is pretty solid, but it's starting to break up. We've seen some of the starts of revolts. There's the Sepoy Rebellion in India in the 1850s, though India still is now it's under direct British rule. But over time, in the next few decades, things are going to change an awful lot. So at the very beginning of the 20th century, we've just come out of, let's go back to the 19th century. The very beginning of the 19th century, we've come out of the American Revolution, the French Revolution. We've gone through the Napoleonic Wars. Then Napoleon was defeated, 1815. We had the Congress of Vienna, where European boundaries are redrawn because Napoleon came in and took over lots of places. In the midst of all of this, we have industrialism going on, and the desire for materials and markets and increasing of imperialism. Plus, we've got Italy and Germany, both of whom had been many principalities, have now each unified. So we have two new unified nations on the scene who are now starting to get involved a little bit late in some case, in Germany's case, a little bit late compared to the other European powers, but really jumping in with both feet into imperialism. So we've had the scramble for Africa, we're working up, and the turn of the century into the 1900s. Let's take a look at our timeline. World War I is called the Great War, not because it was a fantastic fun time. The scale of violence was huge, it was unprecedented, and the number of nations and the scope of involvement was enormous. It wasn't just the European powers, but because we're in a period of imperialism, we've got the colonized countries coming in. We've got Britain bringing in people from India to fight. You go to the different armies, and not everybody's speaking the language of the nation that army is serving, because they're bringing in people from the colonies. So we've got just a huge number of people, the new weapons, all of this is going on. And nationalism is coming up. We've looked at that with respect to imperialism. The war itself started in 1914, ended in 1918. The U.S. didn't come into the war until 1917, which is something that I don't think we emphasize enough in world history, is that there were 3 years of the war before the U.S. came in. At least came in formally. So let's take a look at the causes. We've got shifting global power, imperialism, competition. We've got secret alliances going on. We've got arms races. Germany, Great Britain, Russia, all trying to build up their military. And if you think about this and how it works with imperialism, if you control a territory, you're going to have some amount of power to be able to keep that territory. So these are all feeding into each other. And then we've got some rising nationalism. So let's, and then finally, the last straw here, Franz Ferdinand, Archduke, he's the heir to the throne of the Austria-Hungarian Empire. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated, and that just set everything off. So let's take a look at each of these factors and then how they come together. It's the synergy of the different factors. We break them apart, but they're actually all connected. So we refer to them as the main causes. MAIN are the long-term causes. The immediate cause is that assassination I just mentioned. So let's take a look at our long-term causes. And just a note, the long-term causes, we're not going through them in the order of the acronym. We're going to start with imperialism. So a quick review: industrialization led to the demand for new raw materials and markets, which we have as the M&Ms. Then we have European nations expanding. They're taking new colonies to new forms of imperialism. That's where we think spheres of influence. That's economic imperialism. In India, we go from indirect control through a company to direct control under the British Raj. Opium, Britain wanted to change their balance of trade in that they were importing more from China than they were exporting. Not a favorable balance of trade. So they start having opium that's grown in India, which Britain controls, and bringing that into China. Once that's illegal, then smuggling that into China and ultimately having some wars. So this is an example of where we start getting economic imperialism. There was an edict given in 1810 in China that I think is rather telling. Opium has a harm. Opium is a poison, undermining our good customs and morality. Its use is prohibited by law. Now the commoner, Yang, dares bring it into the forbidden city. However, recently the purchasers, eaters, and consumers of opium have become numerous. So this is an example going in with economic imperialism. Here we have export economies developing. This picture's cotton in North Africa. We've got rubber coming in from the Amazon and from Congo basins. This is from Congo Free State, where King Leopold of Belgium had the Belgian Congo and would exploited workers and abused workers to get that rubber. This is a cartoon that we've looked at before where the face is King Leopold. Now, obviously, this is one of the people who is essentially in slavery in Africa getting the rubber, and this is the rubber on it. This whole body of the snake is the rubber that they're harvesting. And then we've got diamonds coming out of Africa. This on the right is Cecil Rhodes, and over here this is an part of a diamond mine that's outside, not underground. We've got competition between the imperial powers. We see here this is part of the scramble for Africa, where we've got Great Britain down on the bottom right, Holland, Belgium, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Germany, all of these different areas grabbing pieces trying to get their part of Africa. And Europe is becoming destabilized as this goes on. In the meantime, the different countries were forming alliances with each other. Many of these were secret. People didn't know who was allied with whom. And a country who supports another one were then an enemy of the other alliances. By the late 1800s, we have the Triple Alliance, which is Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. And 1907, we've got the Triple Entente, which is Great Britain, Russia, and France. We'll take a look at how alliances change through the war. But these alliances, you can see here, we go into the war and we've got, if something happens to one country, another one is going to defend them, and so on and so forth. And alliances can have the problem with the domino effect, which we'll look at in a minute. So here's a couple of images. The Triple Alliance here is in red. They'll defend each other if they're attacked. Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. You'll also hear me refer to the Austria-Hungarian Empire, which is what this is. Just to get yourself situated, over here you can see there's Belgium, Britain up on the northwest part of the map. France is west of Germany. This unlabeled area is Switzerland. And to the east of Germany and Austria-Hungary, we see Russia. Southeast, we've got the Balkans and Serbia. And over in the South Russia, we have where currently the Ukraine is over here, since that's in the news and a lot's happening right now, worth pointing out. Then in 1907, Russia joins with Britain and France. They didn't say will necessarily help each other, but they're allied and they're surrounding the Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy. So 1914, this is where we're at. Okay, we've got the Triple Alliance, these three, the Triple Entente over here. We have allies of Russia. We've got Serbia and Montenegro, who Russia kind of sees as, like, these are my little brothers. I got to take care of them. And that's really significant when it comes to the very beginning of the war. So just a quick picture. This goes at different times. Austria-Hungary, the Ottomans were involved. Bulgaria, we've got this cartoon of the Triple Entente. We've got Russia, France, and Britain. But as I mentioned, the problem with alliances is if something happens to one, everybody else kind of follows along. And we'll follow up on that in a few minutes. So militarism, we've talked about imperialism, alliances, now we're looking at militarism. Okay, what is militarism? Make sure you have this in your notes. Aggressive military preparedness, celebrating war, celebrating the armed forces. War is seen kind of as a festive event. Okay, the Industrial Revolution, we have mass production of weapons, and we're really now seeing everything pull together. The countries are building up their militaries, they're training their people. Some places are beginning to draft civilians. That's called conscription. And I mentioned earlier the domino effect. When one country, here it's not physically getting involved with each other, but it's a domino effect of militarism. One country built up its military, the next one would do the same. If your neighbor is building up and setting armies on their side of the fence, and you're on your side of the fence and you see they're going to come over and take me, you're going to get something up to defend your side of the fence. So that is going on. Then we've got nationalism. We've looked at it. We've looked at how nationalism fed into Imperialism. Why did imperialism happen? Here we have the idea of self-determination, and we're going back to the Enlightenment. I know everything pulls together. The Enlightenment, self-determination. Under the Enlightenment, we had the idea of natural rights. Here we have people of the same ethnicity, language, culture, religion, political ideas should be united and have the right to form their own independent nation state. Okay. I mentioned religion. It's been an issue for centuries in that we had various we've got Dar al-Islam, we've got the Roman Catholic Church in most of Europe, and now we have smaller groups also. We've got militant nationalism, which we're going to look at in a minute, in the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Here we have the Austria-Hungarian Empire. This map you can see, these are the different ethnic groups. Okay, Austria here, they have Bohemia, Moravia, Galicia, Hungary, Transylvania, Bosnia. All of this is the Austro-Hungarian Empire. But if you look, there's all these different ethnic groups involved. And there's not nice little lines. We've got Germans over here, that's this red, but then we've got Germans especially over here, but then we've got some here in Hungary and a little bit over here in eastern Transylvania and here and there. Then we've got Slovaks right here. We've got Hungarians here, but if you go over here, we have Romanians, and then we have more Hungarians. We have the Balkans over here. We've got Croats and Serbs down here. Serbia is here, but there are a lot of Serbs inside the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And there is this idea of Serbian nationalism that they want to pull together into one country. And that's part of Pan-Slavism, which is Slavic nationalism. Slavic peoples are Russia and peoples in Eastern Europe who have a common heritage. And that's something we're looking at again today with Russia and Ukraine, is that Russia sees Ukraine as being a Slavic nation and being what should be part of Russia, or I should say the government of Russia. I can't speak for the people of Russia. So we've got this nationalism going in, pulling stuff together, and guys, that comes forward to today, as we can see right now. Here's a map that may help a little bit to understand and identify what's going on with Pan-Slavism. We've got the Ottoman Empire in the southeast corner of this map. We know that the Ottomans have been huge. They've been, over time, they've been shrinking, becoming the sick man of Europe, as they've been referred to. And then we've got areas with Slavic heritage, Slavic people. We've got them in what we call the Balkans, which used to be Ottoman. Serbia is very pro-Pan-Slavism. They want people there to be a Slavic nation. Russia has some success over time with this. Right now, when we're looking at what's going on with Ukraine, Russia sees Ukraine as part of that. Here we have Serbia, and the map we looked at before, you saw that there were Serbs and Croats all up in Austria-Hungary as well. So we've looked at the long-term causes. This cartoon you need to know, understand, be familiar with, be able to explain. What we have here is the long-term causes coming together over what's called the dangerous Balkans. We've got some instability going on, where some is kind of understating it. Sarajevo is the place where Franz Ferdinand is about to be assassinated. That is a match coming in. We can see that there are some other matches. So let's look at what these different things are. We see some militarism, the arms race, alliances, triple alliance, triple entente. The naval race over here underneath the triple alliance. also as part of militarism. We've got imperialism, not just here with the colonial rivalry, but kind of throughout this. And then we've got nationalism coming up everywhere and blowing on this. So as soon as you let that match go, we've got the oxygen being added to the fire and everything's going to explode. So after Principe assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, Austria-Hungary looks to Germany, says, hey, if we go against Serbia, will you support us? And Germany very kindly said, yes, we will completely support you. We call that a blank check, where we have said, no matter what happens, we are going to unconditionally support you. Well, then Austria-Hungary turns around, gives Serbia an ultimatum. You've got to let us, well, Austria-Hungary says, Serbia, you have to let us into your country to stop all nationalist movements and to investigate the assassination. Serbia says, I don't think so. And then on July 28th, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia, and they start mobilizing, preparing for war. At this point, it goes on, and we've got that whole problem with alliances as far as going to war. We've got Serbia on the left here. If you touch me, well, then next to them we have Austria, who's not very happy with Serbia. If you make a move, and then we can take a guess who the next person is, someone who sees Serbia as a little brother. We've got Russia there. If you hit that little feller, and then going on next to him is Germany. If you strike my friend, and then we've got France coming in because we've got the Triple Entente here, saying if you hit him, and then here's Britain catching up. Ho there, if you chaps. So you can see there's this whole line of events of what goes on. So Russia's mobilizing because they support Serbia and Pan-Slavism. France begins mobilizing. Germany tells Russia and France, stop mobilizing or we're going to go declare war on you. Russia and France don't stop, so Germany declares war, true to their word. Great Britain at the moment is trying to stay out of it. Yes, they are part of the Triple Entente, but they're trying hard to stay out. If you remember, they weren't vowed to support each other. So we have this European war going on. Germany then goes and invades Belgium. So if we see Germany right here, they go in, they invade Belgium, who's not really doing anything but minding their own business. But that's to get to France because they can't get through over here. So they go through Belgium. And when this happens, Great Britain, who is not on this map, but is actually right up here, says, I don't think so. This is not going to keep going on. Germany is getting close, and they're going through Belgium, who, as I said, was sitting here minding their own business. Not marked here is the English Channel that goes between France and England, and so England is feeling a little bit threatened. Now let's take a look at it and how it is a global war. So the Central Powers, which used to be the Triple Alliance, we've got the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria who've come in. The Allied Powers, which was the Triple Entente, it's nice of us to change names here. We've got, in 1914, Serbia, Belgium, because Belgium had just been invaded by Germany, Montenegro, Romania, Greece, and Portugal. Then Japan gets in because they want German territories in the Pacific. Okay, we've gone from Europe to Europe and East Asia. Well, Europe, North Africa, East Asia. Now we've got Italy switching alliances because the Allies tell Italy that, you know, those parts of Austria-Hungary that are actually Italian, because they've got all these Italians living there, we'll make sure that you get those when we win the war if you fight with us. So we've got growing alliances. As I mentioned before, also the powers would bring in their colonies. 1917, the United States officially entered the war. We had been involved before that. We had an official policy of neutrality, but in reality, we had been involved before 1917. Here's the colonial troops. We've got ANZAC, Corps of New Australian and New Zealand troops, are fighting. Canada is fighting. Britain is drafting Africans and Indians both to serve in their army. France is allied with the Chinese, Vietnamese, and Algerians. France had controlled Vietnam, Algeria, so we've got some close ties there. And a lot of these places were promised self-ruled after the end of the world, after the end of the war. I would love to travel back in time and get in their heads and see what they were expecting to happen. The Arabs allied with Britain. Most places did not get this self-rule. So at this point, we've got the world looking a little bit like this. And this is when people get into the war. I love this map because it, while it's not a perfect map, it gives you an idea of when different areas are getting involved. China, 1917, Russia, 1914, Romania, Turkey, Arabia, Persia. You can see all the little countries around here. You can see the ones that have stayed neutral. Okay, in the middle here, we have Switzerland in the middle of Europe, which is pretty neutral all the time, though they've just broken that this past weekend with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So this is, it's getting to be messy and people are taking sides. And it's not a fun fight. We'll be looking at that after this. Before we're done though, your job now is to write a complete response to the learning objective below. Think of this as your essential question. The EQ would be, what are the causes of World War I? So what you need to do is write a thesis statement that establishes a line of reasoning with at least 3 specific examples, okay, and form that into a short essay. Explain the causes of World War I. This is not a 3, 5, whatever paragraph essay. It has to be at least a paragraph, but it needs to be thorough. Okay, your thesis statement then has to have supporting details that are in their own sentences. So what you want to do now is write that and then upload a photograph of that and your notes to Google Classroom to get credit for this assignment.